What's up,
What's
everybody?
going on?
New show, new things. It's gonna be good
Yep.
times, man.
Yeah, looking
Uh,
forward to it.
so welcome everybody to a brand new show, a brand new thing that Nathan and I are doing. We're gonna be having other people on eventually as we get deeper into this series, but what it is a new podcast related to all things gaming, but we're mostly going to be focused on MMORPGs, tabletop, and sort of discussions around the two. Obviously, hosting it here on our Weave and Void Twitch channel, which is where we also play the 5th edition tabletop sessions for the World of the Weave and the Void, which is that world map behind me. That's the world that my brother and my wife and I created, and we are currently live streaming every Sunday night with Nathan, Sparrow, Bounty Code, and Skinny as we go through the campaign for that. We're currently in season 1 presently. You can catch those Sunday nights here at 8 p.m. Central. And we all have a vested interest in this. We have a partnership here on Twitch. So if you would like to support all of the aforementioned people, while you're here, and if you like what you see here tonight, or if you like what you see on Sunday nights, don't forget to throw a subscription on this channel. It's a great way of saying thanks to everybody that's here. Now, this being a new show, is going to be taking place here on Thursdays around 6 p.m. Central every Thursday. We will be live bringing new fun topics to you with some guests every once in a while on the show, while, I might add, we are fishing in World of Warcraft. Thus the title Catch of the Day, with the topic of the day being whatever it is. I've never fished in WoW. Have you ever fished in WoW?
Yeah, a little bit. I leveled this one that I'm on now a bit, so I've got some mild, uh, little bit of experience here. So let's. While you're on your way here, are you coming to where I'm at?
Yeah,
I've got a
yeah.
nice cozy spot
I
for
gotta
us.
show you my fishing hat too.
Oh yeah, I gotta see your fishing hat. Oh, nice fishing hat.
I
Looks
got
good.
gotta show the
Looking
stream
good.
too. I had to. I actually, you know what I should have done? I have that hat here at the house, but I think Chris used it for some yard work yesterday, so I don't actually have it on me right now.
So let's talk about what's the topic today.
Uh, are barriers of entry toxic by nature? This was something that has come up. If you've ever showed up to any of our multi-stream sessions, um, it's usually we. I'm trying to think here. We do the Tuesday morning
Mm-hmm.
Vanguard, the Friday night P99, and then the Thursday night World of Warcraft, which, by the way, is happening right after this. Those of you who are tuning in live, we're going from this straight to the guild meeting at 7, and then we go into the static group that we do, the multi-stream that we do on Thursday nights here in World of Warcraft Classic. That's happening at 7:30 tonight. This is something that's come up in some of our previous multi-streams, talking about things that people label toxic. And I think it was, I could be wrong. So if it wasn't Sparrow, then I apologize. But I think it was Sparrow who had said something along the lines of barriers of entry being toxic. If it wasn't her, it was somebody in one of the morning static groups.
Sure.
Hey, I'm answering everybody here on
Yeah, and
Twitch.
barriers to entry could be a lot. That could mean a lot of different things, right? But I think what first comes to my mind is things in the game, right? Like that hold you back. Like that could be rating being difficult, gear scores, or even maybe lockouts, even where you can't join someone else because of an in-game system. I think all those things would apply, right?
Yeah, the question I think that was raised, which is why I put this on the list, was whether or not those things are by their nature toxic. Do they lead to toxic behavior from people? Because I think that spun out of a conversation we were having about raiding and how raiding has a certain level of
Sure.
aggression to it, and people who, because they're so focused on not getting behind the curve, they don't want to get stuck behind and being someone that's locked out of progression and things of that nature. It can lead to people being a little overly aggressive. um, I would think that probably only applies though in older games where the barrier of entry. I think the one that we come back to quite frequently is like if we're playing P99 or even here in Classic. because they
Okay.
haven't introduced Air in Classic. The fact that only one person, they don't have phasing here, so only one person can get credit for a kill, or the group gets credit for the kill, or only one person or one group gets credit for. Hang on, who's yelling?
Yeah. Getting serious.
Oh my goodness.
The Lich King's gaze is fixed upon us.
Well, now should we be fishing here? Is my next question. Like, am I gonna die while I'm holding a rod in my hand?
Yeah, but so with that, I will say that like a lot of things can lead to toxic behavior. I think overall, I think it really just comes down to who you're with. Some people are going to be more aggressive about problems or foreseeing issues like I think trying to be server first or is toxic by nature. And because that's too competitive not to be. You know what I mean? Sparrow's here fishing with
Yeah,
us.
I just saw
What's up,
notice
Sparrow?
that.
Do you agree with that? Like just
Well,
trying to be super competitive on the very edge of the content.
well, I do think that looking at what I was just talking about before I got distracted by the dude yelling at us from the sky, I will say that in a system where the players are competing for resources, whether it be a quest spawn or a mob spawn, and they haven't introduced phasing yet, there's always going to be that level of competitiveness, which is the first come, first serve nature of that type of content. Now, they have eliminated that in live, in retail, as well as in games like ESO, where anyone who tags a mob gets credit, everyone gets their own harvesting nodes, everyone gets their own quest nodes, like it's all phased so that you don't have to have that competitive nature. Because the devs have done what they could to try to eliminate that toxic behavior by eliminating what caused it in the first place was a limitation of resources. I think that yes, part of it is I think a large part of it is that limitation on resources, but the other part is what you mentioned, which is when you have that limitation on resources and you have the competitive nature that comes with people wanting to be world first,
Yeah.
you can find that behavior taking place. Because if nobody gave a shit and it was all just let's smell the roses on our way, I think I think it's part of what you'll find if you get into a guild that fits your pace. You can sort of eliminate the majority of that type of behavior, even in a game like P99 or World of Warcraft Classic, where you still have competition for nodes. Because if your guild is completing the content at their own pace, I think you're not going to run into that too much unless you're doing something where there's lots of other people outside of your guild trying to get it. Because like we were talking about this the other night, running wasn't it with you? Was it this morning we were doing that? We were talking about like if we had been trying that heroic with a pickup group,
Yeah.
you would have been kicked to the curb because
Oh, I
your
would have.
gears.
Absolutely. I would have expected to. I would have probably left. That's the thing. Like, I recognized, oh, I shouldn't be here. I would have probably been like, I'm sorry, guys. I am not geared for this. You know, I'm gonna leave. And I would even, depending on the type of game, you can't really do that in classic. You can, but in like retail, you wouldn't be able to do this. Which is, I would try to help them find a replacement for me that is geared, right? Because I would feel bad because I came here, we got all rallied up, and then we can't even do the content, and it's my fault. I'm not ready for that content, right? So that's the way I would look at it. But otherwise, if I didn't have that attitude, they would have certainly kicked me because I was getting one-shotted. You know what I mean? I was getting beat up. Like, nobody was going to be able to get past that particular group of trash mobs because my gear wasn't good enough. So I think it's a problem on both sides. I think the person who realizes like, hey, this is my fault, we can't get past this, and I can go prepare myself better next time, should also own up to it. But some people won't, and then you get people who they don't want to waste everybody else's time. So I think it really sometimes the toxicity comes down to like the leader sometimes has to make that call and say, hey, there's nice ways to do it and there's mean ways to do it. But the nice would be like, hey, look, man, there's, a whole raid of us. Unfortunately, you need XYZ, or you need to improve on XYZ, or you can't do it. Therefore, we need to work on that because it's wasting everybody else's time. Everybody else is ready for this, right?
By the way, Sparrow said she doesn't think it was her who came up with that topic discussion. Zinix is saying in chat, here's the thing though, once you get to a certain point, you might as well be playing a single player game. Are we talking
I
about
can see what he's saying. He's talking about like with
phasing, right?
nodes and making phasing and all that kind of thing. And that's the way I feel. It's one of those things where I understand it, and I even can enjoy it, with the phasing and making things to where there's not competition, etc. But I think there has to be a combination of both. There has to be a little bit of that, kind of like there needs to be world bosses, there needs to be instanced raid bosses, right? In my opinion, you need both. The world bosses are fun. I think you have to build those to scale with the amount of people. Um, of course, people will break that system. They'll, if you scale it to go up to 150, they'll bring 300. You know what I mean? But that's fine. Try to make it scalable at least, so it can't be super cheesed. And but I do think the same thing with nodes. Maybe the really rare ones you do have to compete for, or something. I feel like there needs to be a bit of a balance there because I think the competition is part of the fun, even when you lose. Does that make sense?
I think for some people that might be the case. I know I'm very much in favor of because I've been at the top, and many players have experienced this if you've been at the top. Um, when I was younger, I did live on and thrive on the competition of, you know, you know, not I don't like PvP, but in PvE I did used to very much enjoy that breakneck pace of we're trying to be world first or we're trying to be server first, and we're gonna stomp on whoever we have to stomp on to get there. Um, it's first come first serve, and if you can get there and you can be the first, and you get those server first tags, you get those world first tags. There is a great sense. It's a rush of adrenaline that comes with
Mm-hmm.
that. As I've gotten older, I no longer care about that anymore. But when I did, I was very much in favor for that system because I liked it. I liked being able to be competitive and be like, fuck you, I'm gonna get there first in a good way, not in a bad way. It's kind of like my brother and I, if we're competing for something, it's the brotherly fuck you. It's the
Sure.
I'm gonna beat you, you suck. I don't think there was anything malicious behind it, but it was definitely if you're not the brother, you might mistake that competitive behavior for toxicity. Because I know a
True.
lot of people will argue that, well, that person stole my camp, they stole my kill, they're perma-camping the mob, they're not letting me have access to it, they're camp stealing, blah, 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 blah. A lot of people will label that as toxic behavior, and I
Sure.
don't necessarily agree with that because I think it's more of a case of we all pay the same monthly fee, we all have access to the same amount of content, and while there might be a quote unquote moral obligation to, let everyone share access in a social environment like a socialist gameplay system, in the competitive sense, no, it's first come, first serve. Now, as I've gotten older, I very much dislike having to share nodes with other people, and I go batshit when I'm like trying to get a quest item off the ground
Sure.
and someone runs up and like we're obviously killing our way to it. Our group is there. It's happened a lot to Maduros and my brother and I questing in the morning, and you're working your way to a quest mob, and you're almost there. You've been clearing for 15 minutes, and here comes this other dude swooping in on his griffin from the sky. He drops down on the ground, pulls the mob, and it's like, what? Come on, man! Like, and so now that I'm dabbling in retail a little bit, I'm really enjoying the retail version a lot better in that sense
Mm-hmm.
because I get to progress at my own pace. And Xenix is not wrong in the sense that it does lead to a sort of single player
That's yeah.
mentality, but I'm okay with that because there's still group based activities that I can partake in when I want to, and I don't have to deal with any of the quote unquote toxic behavior. Now, I still wouldn't call it toxic behavior. I understand that it is what it is. Camps aren't recognized, first come, first serve, and if I'm not going to be, aggressive about it, then I kind of just have to suck it up and deal with it.
And I made a video about this a long time ago. I feel like without a little bit of a struggle between, because we mostly all of us enjoy mostly PVE content, and I feel like that the bonds of finding people who are nice and friendly and you get along with, etc., are more meaningful when you also have some negative bump-ins. I think that's part of the experience. I think having a villain, somebody that you don't like in the world, on the server you play with, is a lot of fun. And I'm gonna go back to Dark Age Camelot, and I'm not talking about PvP. I'm talking about the PvE end of things, where there's another paladin on the server. And look, I was not the best paladin on the server. I'm not trying to claim that, but I was well liked and had a good reputation. Let me put it there. I had a good reputation. Um, and he and I were actually friends. We would send tells to each other, etc. He probably was the best paladin on the server. Um, he was better than me, no doubt. But we had a little fun in the public eye. And we were playing on an RP server, by the way. We had a little fun in the public when we talked, and anybody could see us in the group chat and or slash say or yelling or whatever, that we were nemesis, right? Like that we competed with we really didn't, but it was fun. And then I've also had people that I actually genuinely didn't like, that I thought they were toxic, I thought they were bad people, and they were real nemesis. And it just, I think that you need people that you don't like in order to appreciate fully the people that you do like. And I think that's true in life, and I think that's true in MMOs in the virtual world too.
That's a good
So I
point.
think a little bit of that rubs you a little the wrong way. Maybe you don't like it when it happens, but like it's good for you at the end of the day.
Sorry
So
to
I
get.
think I like a little bit of that. I like there to be a little bit of friction. Now there's a limit to that.
Sure.
I think raid bosses is a good example of not good, because that being camped 24/7 and locking that content to where a big guild on that server is the only ones that really get to do that content. That's bad design, because now that content is can be completely not available to anybody, right?
Well, that ties into. By the way, I had to run and go train journeyman fishing. I can't believe how
Okay.
fast it went. I forgot that we get
Oh yeah,
updates like every single cast now, which is really cool.
yeah. The experience helps with harvesting experience, I believe, as well. So I
Yeah.
think it's going faster.
Something to consider about what you just said, and then I'll go to chat for the next part. This goes back to a lot of people want to have. I know this is a separate discussion that's going to come up on the show, which is whether or not there should be camps in a game. Most games don't recognize camps for these
Sure.
reasons.
Yeah.
But the idea, a lot of people say, if I'm there first, I think most people will say, if I'm there first, you need to respect my camp. However, the same people who say that will then bitch and moan when the raid guild is doing the same thing, except they're monopolizing the content because they never leave. Because
Right.
it is the same thing. They were there first.
It's the same thing.
If they can claim it, and if they can keep that camp locked down for the next 28 days, okay, that's fair game. However, it does lock everyone else out, and that's a question of, is that toxic behavior? Because back in the day, I would give an example of Moral Fool, the server that I was on in the early days of EverQuest. In the early days, there was a schedule, a calendar, and guilds would sign up, and people generally respected each other, and everybody got their fair shot, and you would get your turn. But it wasn't very long, I think within the first year, as I recall, um, the Asian guilds came onto our server, and they didn't give a fuck about the calendar for us US guilds. It was, we're on a
Right.
different time zone. The mobs are up. You guys are all asleep. We're going to take it. And that made a lot of people very irritated. But at the same time, when you're playing an international game, that's just kind of par for the course, which is why so many games have moved away from the camp system and they don't recognize that anymore, because you can't police that type of behavior if it's first
Right.
first servers.
There's going to be too much of it, and
Yes.
it's going to get to a point where it's going to, no matter what, it's going to look like your customer service sucks, because you're going to have so many queues of so many various discrepancies. You know what I mean? Like everybody will want a referee for every situation. You know what I mean? There's just no way a company could possibly pull that off. I don't believe.
Well, and I think that's why we've seen so many companies move towards instancing for raids, because
Sure.
you can then eliminate that problem right at the gate. Well, there's no longer any competition for those mobs because we've moved it all behind an instance or a phase, so everyone can work on it at their own pace, which I'm a big fan of, because you could still be competitive in terms of we got there first, without, and this is where I'm going to pivot to the chat for a second, without, because I'm going to agree to disagree with Sparrow that that's toxic behavior, but
Real quick, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
yeah,
thank you, Crinkle One, for the Prime subscription. Appreciate you,
yes,
man.
thank you very much, Crinkled.
All right, sorry, go ahead.
Because Sparrow had said what's toxic about that is that you have to stomp on others to win. There's being first, and that's great, but
Mm.
having to ruin someone else's time so you can quote unquote win is another thing. That's bad development. It was bad development, which is why games moved to instancing. Now, I don't necessarily consider that to be toxic at all. Stomping on others to win, I don't consider that. It's no different than if you've ever played basketball, baseball. Like, you're gonna be aggressive. Your goal is to stomp the other team. Like, you're not there to be
Yeah,
nice and be friends with them. It's
right.
when game time is on, my game face is on. I might love you and hug you after the game, but when we're playing, oh no, it's on, bitch. Like, I'm here to stomp your face in the ground. Um, but that's why they moved to the instancing because it was bad development.
Sure.
That is a thing where we saw the flaws in that early iteration and we moved away from it and said, well, we can still have the barriers to entry, but we can have it be a barrier to get into a raid zone, which I think we just did. We're working on that in Vanguard right now. In the Saga of Heroes Emulator, we're working on a Keat quest to get into the Tomb of Lord Sang, and
Yeah,
like we have to get a key to get in, and it's no different. We did the same thing here with Alcatraz the other day
true.
in the Burning Crusade content. You have to get a key to get in. Crinkle
Yeah, and
says, "You Twitch."
Savant said the best MMO stories come from drama between guilds, loot griffers, or the inconvenience of something, and your friends overcoming the hurdle. And that there's
hmm
a lot of stories come from that. And I'll tell you something else is that drives some people to log in more too, to try to outdo the competition, or to try to get a leg up, or to be ahead, or whatever the case may be. So that is a big driving factor that I feel like the majority of the MMO genre is slipping away from. We're losing that aspect of, because we're trying to be a little too casual. I think there is a blend of it, and I understand from a developer,
Whoops.
or well, I should say from a publisher or investor point of view, the goal is to make money, and the more people that play, the more money you can make. So, um, but it's I would argue that's the same for like what we do on YouTube and or we're doing here on Twitch, right? It would be in our interest to not have a niche at all, to just you know uh, try to make every single customer happy and make everybody want to be a subscriber, etc. But actually, in reality, that's not good, right? Like, we know that. We see the data. Because having a focused group of people like us for MMOs, RPGs, whatever it may be, we focused in on a part of gaming that we enjoy. And because we're passionate about it and we pour that out, we get something back from it. We get subscribers, etc. And I feel like that's the same thing for MMOs. And I feel like they've all tried to get so casual now, so friendly. No, try to make you never have a bad time. To where there's always a way to have that everything is going to be a-okay, and you're going to get what you want, what you need, um, and I feel like you've lost that aspect of what was really cool in the old school MMOs, which was get a little drama in there. Have a little friction with some people in the world. And build a more diverse palette of emotions when you're in this virtual world.
Savant says there's a fine line of having hurdles to overcome and having camp/griefing that stops you playing the game, especially now that a lot of old school MMO players are older and have responsibilities. So see, that's the thing. I'm in favor of the new way of doing things where nobody recognizes camps, because I think camps were I think camps were stupid. Camps were player created. They were not designer created. They were just things that naturally came apart when players first started playing MMOs, and they said, "Oh, look at that place. Let's go up there and camp the orcs because it looks like a good place to pull orcs to." Oh, now that's going to be called Orc Hill. That's become a camp, and now players are going to claim that camp, and they're going to say, "We claim all the mobs that are in this area." Now, I've never been a big fan of that system because I've always been of the belief that I pay the same subscription as everyone else, and therefore I have the same right to that content as everyone else. Now, if your group is there and you're actively clearing all the mobs and you're keeping it clear, then kudos to you. But if I roll up and you're leaving spawn there and you're not actively keeping it all clear, then I'm going to pull your mobs because they're up and I need XP just as much as you do, and I'm paying the same amount as you. So it's kind of like if I go to a fishing hole and we're both paying, like we are right now, I'm going to use the fishing example. If I go to a state
Sure.
park and we both paid for a license to get into the state park and we go
Mm-hmm.
down and we're fly fishing, you'll notice that guys line up on the bank. If one guy is standing here, the next guy will go right next to him. They're fishing in the same lake, but they're respecting the fact that, well, you can't have all the fish at this fishing hole, but you can have the fish that are in this portion of the fishing hole. But it's a big fishing hole. We can all camp from the same fishing hole. That's the way I've always looked at it. Now, some people get offended by that because, like, no, I camped this. These are my mobs. And that is a perception issue, I feel, that a lot of people have had where they feel like they have a claim on something that's not actually theirs, which has led to the labeling of toxic behavior when it comes to the access component. But that's a personal opinion. I know that not everyone shares that opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the fishing example is good. I would also say that just like fishing, though, that there actually is a finite amount of fish in that lake, right? It's unlikely that there'll be enough fishermen to do that in that particular situation, but there is a finite amount of fish. So there is, and the other thing is like if the one person fishing has better lure and bait, then they deserve to catch the better fish. They've
got
put in the extra
enchantments.
work, and they've got it right. Like they might catch more than you. Um, and I think that's fair. And I don't. Did that guy just appear out of nowhere?
Oh my god. I'd love to meet
Why
that
is he
Peggle
here?
fellow.
What just that? Oh! Bounty code
I think
summoned him.
Bounty
I was
summoned
like,
him.
I thought it was an NPC that just suddenly appeared.
You guys are stealing all my fish. Zinnik says, I've done both in EQ. For instance, we kept playing time to ourselves for months, not by training or kill stealing, but we would kill the names for the flags even if we didn't need them. So here, that's a great. So what
Mm.
he just mentioned, many, many, many people would consider toxic because his guild was basically saying, you know what? All these mobs that you need to get keyed, we're gonna go ahead and take those even though we don't need them, which is gonna quote unquote block other people from being able to access that content. Now that's the monopoly component that would irritate a lot of other raid guilds. There's nothing inherently wrong with that behavior. It's a little bit of competition. It's like, well, if you want it bad enough, your guild should be here and be ready to take it before we take it again.
Yeah.
But that also is something that led to many arguments, people rage quitting, people not having fun, and so the developers moved away and went towards instancing so that everyone could get kind of equal access to the raid content.
I've got to agree. For a raid boss, I think there's ways to do the zone itself without it being completely instanced all the time. If you want to do some that is, because you want a very lore-heavy story type situation here for this part, then yeah, definitely instance that. But if you just want it to be a big zone full of raid content, and then then when you get to the boss, that part has to be instanced or phased in some kind of way, because otherwise it does. As of now, with technology today, we've not found a decent solution to that problem besides instancing. Now, I don't believe that means all dungeons need to be instanced. I think if a dungeon's full and you literally can't, you're not able to kill enough mobs to have fun, etc., then you just go to a new dungeon. And it's up to the developers to have enough content in their game to where that's a possibility to do.
On the
So I don't
subject
think
of
everything has to be instanced. Just there's raid bosses, yeah, for now, until we find a better solution.
yeah, so looking at kind of looking back to the original concept of, because we're spinning off into instancing a lot too, which is going to be another topic we discuss. What are some other examples of access that have caused toxicity or the perception of toxicity. Um, because when we look at, we've looked at the idea of gatekeeping, like having a barrier of entry to a zone, right? Where that zone has keys and the key mobs are locked down by Guild A, and other people view that as being toxic behavior if they can't get access to it. What's
Sure.
another example of that? Because I feel like you've got in the old days. I don't feel like that's an issue in modern games, or am I missing something in modern games? Because I don't see any of these issues cropping up in like Star Wars: The Old Republic or Elder Scrolls Online. I haven't played enough WoW retail to see it there. Lord of the Rings Online, I don't see an issue there. Um, Hoshi put something in chat that I want to get to here in a minute because I think that's a great uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
part of this. But I know back in the day. Oh, that is it. So I will pivot to that actually because
Good. Yeah.
this is a great pivot. Gear score integration. So gear score integration. If I could take it back even further, where we can go to EverQuest 1, and I remember back in the day on the forums there was a big um, hubbub amongst role players who complained that it wasn't fair that they weren't allowed to join X or Y guild because X or Y guild had recruitment standards of things like you have to have X amount of AC or Y amount of resists to join this guild, and they were accused of being elitist assholes. The
Hmm.
reality, for those who have never raided at that level, is that there are gear restrictions for certain zones because if a breath weapon goes off and you don't have the resists, you're going to
You're
get
dead.
one-shotted. If you don't have
Yeah.
the armor class, you're going to get one-shotted. And a perfect example of a gear score being in place was was it yesterday? The day before. We went to go do the brew master dude in Black Fathom Deeps, and we had a person in our group. I can't remember, it was a paladin, I think, who had just hit level 70, and his gear was not that good. Nothing against him as a player. We tried 3 different times, wiped throws 3 different times. They had to go to dinner. We then pulled in Styx, who was raid geared and heroic geared, and we on the first try, boom, we did it, and then did it again and again. And we're quickly able to do it because he had the proper gear. And I know, Nathan, you this morning, when we
Yep.
were attempting to do Blood
Heroics.
Furnace, your gear was so bad because you just hit level 70, you haven't had a chance to get your defense up, and you tried to do the heroic version of Blood Furnace. You got face stomped multiple
Yep.
times, so I went and got Stigwell, and we went from there.
And
Now,
finished it. Yep.
right, and I would look at that and say, some people will say that gear score integration is toxic by its very nature because it leads to an elitist attitude of we're not going to take you in our group because you don't have X amount of gear score. And I will say that there's two ways of looking at that, and then I'll shut up and you can talk about this, Nathan. One is the guild that says you need to have that because they are rating the content that requires you to have that. And then there's the other side, which are the people who arbitrarily decide that that's what you need to run with them because they don't want you to be a burden on them when they run the dungeon because your DPS is going to be quote unquote too slow.
Yeah.
Because I know Crinkle just said gear score is cancer, and I'm gonna agree to disagree on that. Um,
Players will find another way, right? So even if you don't have a gear score, for example, let's say you have achievements in the game. Pretty common then in that case that they'll say, hey, we're doing this raid fight. If you haven't already beat it, you can't join because that tells me that maybe you can't do it. But then new players can't get in a group to do that boss because for the first time because nobody wants to accept them unless they've already done it, and that's super common too. So I think the gear score is just pointing to an issue that is real that I think some people just don't understand.
didn't
So if you've
but
rated, you know that there are certain requirements or you're not going to be able to do it.
I
Um,
feel like you just
so
described like the real world hiring situation with someone who
sh-
says like
sure.
it's an entry level position, but we need you to have 10 years of
Sure.
experience.
Yeah, exactly. And it is kind of the same thing, but and it is toxic. But I would also argue that there's reverse toxicism going on here, which is the people who aren't ready, can't do the content,
And
but
then
want
cry
to be
about it.
carried because they don't meet the requirements that are necessary. Like, this is hard content, guys. You're not doing a dungeon, right? This is another form of content that is difficult. And it's okay if you don't like to go and grind and do all the things necessary to get the better gear score, to get the this and that. But you tell me the solution for a developer to make hard content without it being hard. What's explain how that's supposed to work, right? So, and the solution for MMOs, in my opinion, I was talking about this earlier today with my chat, is that if you don't want to do all that extra prep work to raid, etc., and you don't have the time commitment for that, that's okay. But that just means you're going to be behind on raid content. So as new content comes out, better gear, more accessible, you can go back and do that content when it's easier, right? So TBC content, we level up some in Wrath, we get really good gear. We can go back and easy go do the TBC content if we want, and we don't need that big hefty requirement because that now the easy gear to get, or the stuff comes with quests, etc., is available to us, and that's way better than the raid gear was back then. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So I think there already is a solution. I think we always look at the people who are the leaders of raid guilds who are having to set these rules because it's required for everybody else in their party and raid group to have a good time, just for the one person who literally isn't ready for that raid.
Mm-hmm. Crinkle had something to say too about that's not where gear score is. Gear score boils your gear down to a number, which you can be in DPS, epics, and suck ass as a tank, but the gear score would say they were good. I see where that argument lies, but that's also, I would argue that no amount of skill can make up for a requirement that the game has to get in to be able to do certain content. Like, it's not an incorrect argument that's being made there. There are certain.
Yeah, gear score. I understand. I know what gear score is. Trust me, but it's still. How is somebody supposed to grade you on your how good you are at your class? They don't know that until they play with you.
So the gear score is a great sort of eyeball of knowing, well, you've at least gotten this far. Theoretically, you should be good enough because of your gear score, and then you find out if they're skilled beyond there. And Tripp said it's a tool. It's the players that make it terrible, and I will 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
That's most things. By the way, we were just talking about something that's going to spin off into another subject that we're going to talk about later on, which is going to be parsers. Because parsers are useful tools, and every raid guild should use them, including our guild. But they are a tool that should only be used by leadership for certain...
To
help figure out what you might be doing wrong on a raid, not to look down on another player and tell them, you suck, if that makes sense, or to use them in a group and kick the player because they're not hitting a certain cap. Tools are just tools. They're benign things, but when players abuse them, that's when we get into the toxic behavior, which I think, spinning back around to the original topic, of are barriers of entry toxic by nature, I don't think any of these things are toxic by nature. I think it's players who can make them toxic because of the way they are. But that's just human nature, I think, at the end of the day.
Yeah. And the reason why is because no matter what you do, there's going to be people who find a way to make it evil. It's true with technology. It's true with everything in the whole wide world. People will find a way to turn anything nefarious. That's just human nature. It's what we do. So it's going to be the same thing with tools, and anything added in the game for a specific purpose is going to be misused. And I think gear score. I understand the sentiment, and I kind of I'm kind of in the middle on that. I see the value of having a gear score as an indicator, but I also realize that it causes a lot of issues. So I don't really stand firmly in either direction.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen it so much here because I haven't seen the gear score get implemented yet, but I know in like Destiny 2 it was a big thing. But it was also a good indicator of whether or not you had good enough gear to be able to do the content in the first place. And when it's used for that method, I don't really see it being a barrier to entry. Do any games these days do the way they did it during the Planes of Power expansion in EverQuest 1, where you had to get flagged for each raid in order of sequence? I haven't played any other. I haven't raided hardcore since EverQuest 2, and EverQuest 2 was always just sort of, at least up until the Shadow Odyssey, you could kind of just go do the content as long as your gear
Hmm.
was good enough. There was never a raid progression like there was in Planes of Power. But I know during Planes of Power, that was the expansion that I can remember, apart from Shadows of Luckland, where during Shadows of Luckland, now there was a big some of the raid guilds got butthurt because other guilds were permalocking the keys to get into Sraw. And I know, like what Zenix was saying, his guild was doing the same thing for Plane of Time. Have any other games done that, or just was that the last game that did it like that?
You mean where you have to do them in the right order?
Like a raid progression, and everything is public and can be locked down by other guilds.
Oh, okay. I can't really think of any that I've done anyway, but I've only rated in a handful of games.
Mm.
I think it might have been unique to that, and that I believe that was very possibly the example that made people start trying other things.
Probably, yeah. Because it was a lot of fun, but it did suck if you were on the other side of that equation.
Sure.
Hmm. Someone,
Yeah.
Howie was saying that gear score is a major issue in Wrath. How is it a major? Like, how is it a major? He says Wrath is all about gear score. In what way? Because I've never played Wrath, so I'm genuinely curious as we prepare to head into Wrath. How is that what does that look like, and how can that be perceived as toxic?
I think I'm gonna say what I think people mean by that, because this is something I've noticed with the rating in Final Fantasy 14, which is also all about your gear score, even if it has a different name, same difference. And that was that, like, that's all you care about at that point. I think it does take away a bit from um, just the checking out the stats. You know, I'm going to build up my strength, and I'm going to build up my dexterity, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and I'm looking for gear that does these things. Everybody does tend to just say, don't care, gear score's better, getting that. That's what I want, because the gear score's better. And it just kind of funnels the gear into this one category, and things get less interesting, I feel like. That's the only issue I can really think of it, besides people, using it as indicators when it's not necessary. That's when it's really bad. It's like, it's a regular dungeon, and this happened to me. I get to max level. There's a few dungeons that drop the good gear I need, right? And that's where I'm supposed to be going, so that I can get better gear, so I can then start doing the low tier raids and get better gear and start the whole progress, right? And I can't even get in the dungeons because the groups require this outrageous gear score so they can speed run it, and I can't. So now I'm stuck. Now I literally can't even get to the gear because every group kicks me as soon as they see my gear score.
Yeah, Joey had that happen to him in live. I do want to ask a question here, though. Howie is saying you need a certain gear score to do the dungeons. Who says that you need it? The game says that
The
you need it,
game, yeah.
or the
Well,
other
I'm
player?
guessing the game, because I know that that's in retail. You'll get to a certain dungeon, you're the right level, but you need better gear scores.
So
You
Howie's
can't
saying
even enter it.
the game is going to tell
The
you.
game.
I have no problems with that. I have, because that's Destiny 2. That's many games out there that if you play in a tiered structure like that, I have no problem with that. If it's the game telling me, I'm okay with that. It's when other players are dictating it to me that I have an issue with it.
Because they usually have unrealistic expectations, like I was talking about. Not
Yes.
always. With the raid content, sometimes that is the minimum gear score to survive.
That's the issue.
Things that happen in that fight.
That's why. That's why I
and that's why
appreciate
the
it.
game does it.
Yes.
That's why the game does it, because they know that if your gear score isn't X,
You're gonna
then
die.
you're gonna die. You're gonna
Which-
piss off everybody. They're kind of protecting you, I feel like,
They're getting
from
rid of the
accidentally
application.
going in and feeling silly because
They're getting rid of that whole, because before that, guilds had to have that in their application process. Do you have 1,000 AC? Do you have 100 resists and all your things?
Sure.
And by having a gear score in place, we don't have to make that disclaimer. It's just like,
faster and easier. Yeah.
etc. Gear screen. The only thing I remember from Wrath is having to have the achievement that you finish the raid to do the raid. That makes no sense. The only thing I remember from Wrath is having to have the achievement that you finish the raid to
He
do the
means
raid.
groups having that. He's not talking
Oh,
about the
oh,
game. He means like what we were talking about earlier, where
for
it's like, hey,
pickups.
we're running this, but if you want to join us, you have to have already
Oh,
beat it before. We need to see that
if
achievement. You know.
if I was running a pickup raid, I would absolutely have that requirement. If you haven't done the raid, I don't want you on my raid because it's pickup. I need people who have at least done it one time to make sure that we don't have the one bad apple that's going to fuck it up for everyone else who's going to be here for the next 3 hours. So I agree with that. However, for a guild, I think it's you know you should be taking people who have never done it before. Like that's the point of a guild is to gear up your guild mates and do the content together. Was it the group? Was it Sparrow saying was it only a group find that checked your gear score? Crinkled says wait until you ask to share your achievement and get kicked.
Yeah,
I have
the
no.
group finder. That's right, Sparrow. I could be wrong, but I'm close to 100% sure that it was when you used the dungeon finder. If you just made a group, I don't think it cared what you went in with. If you just go in yourself, I don't think it really cared. You could go in, you know, totally not the gear score and not the right party layout, etc.
Okay, so backing up a second. So what you're saying is that the what was just mentioned earlier that the game
Mm-hmm.
has a gear check. That only applies if you're using the dungeon finder. If you're
I
going in by yourself with your
think
own
so.
raid group. So if we're going in as a guild, that gear check is a recommendation, not a hard barrier.
I'm
Whereas if
going off of my knowledge, which could be outdated and wrong,
so
but
if we
that's
can
what
get a
I believe.
yeah, if we can get a confirmation of that in the guild chat, that would be great. Like so because if it's a recommendation and then the game only stops you if you're doing through a pickup system. And also Trip says the whole conversation revolves around pugs. 100% agree with that.
Yeah, yeah.
For absolutely for sure.
Yeah, because probably you're not going to run into these issues with the guild, and if you do, you're probably not going to stay in that guild. You're going to find another one that you don't run
Yes.
into those issues with. And so, realistically, the easy solution for anybody to almost all these problems is you need to find people like-minded to play with, and you don't see these issues as much. It's when you have to dive into the pug system or the, you know, looking for group in the chat and or looking for group tool that we got coming, etc., that you're gonna run into this stuff.
Yeah, because I wouldn't have a problem. Crinkle said, "Wait until you're asked to show your achievements or get kicked." I wouldn't have a problem with that. Like, if I was grouping, like playing a character zone, I would not be expected to automatically get into a pickup raid just because I want to do it. Like, I would expect that if there's a barrier of entry, if I don't have the barrier of entry, well, I guess I need to go find a guild that fits my playstyle, that fits my time zone, that needs my class, and I'll go gear up with them, and then I can do the content. But I've always had a thick skin about that kind of stuff where I don't mind being told like yeah I can't do something and but that's fine. It is what it is. It gives you a goal to shoot for, I think.
Sure, sure.
By the way,
That's the way
what
I'll look at it.
what level does this fishing area tap out at? I'm still getting skill points.
Realistically, we should probably have moved on, but we can do that next session. Go to the next known
Yeah, we're
popular
actually
spot.
probably about 10 more minutes. We'll start migrating towards the guild meeting spot.
Yeah, for those that don't know, we have a guild meeting tonight at 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern that we're going to be moving over to directly after this stream. And we play on Pagel Alliance if you're interested in joining us.
Yeah, and those will be streamed. We're multi-streamers tonight, so we'll be multi-streaming these things. Nathan will be on his YouTube channel. I'll be on my YouTube channel. Sparrow will be on her Twitch channel. My brother will be joining us around 7:30. Maduros joins us around 7:30. But the meeting's going to be taking place at Ravenholt in South Shore, and then in the group chat, Group 1 in our Wandering Hermits Discord for those of you who want to join us. It's going to be streamed breakout, so if you can't make it, don't worry about it. It'll be up, available through on-demand services after the fact. Probably 30 minutes, maybe longer, depending on how long people hang out and do costumes and PvP and whatever else people want to do while they're hanging out.
Yep.
I think going back to the conversation of are these things toxic by nature? I keep coming back to no. I think it's the people that can make these things toxic. which is a whole nother. We're going to have another discussion about that topic in particular on another night, where we're going to be talking about toxicity and whether or not the things that people think are toxic behavior might actually just be misconceptions or misunderstandings or people's opinions or personal baggage or things that might be having them think that things are toxic. Because usually when we look at things from an analytical state of mind, we find that systems are generally agnostic, and it's
Yeah.
people's opinions that get in the way of something being considered
And yeah,
toxic or
and
not.
in that conversation, inevitably, how much of that is up to the players and how much of that is on the developers,
That's a
right?
fair point.
Yeah.
Also, Sparrow said she's getting skill ups at here, and she's at 300, which is very interesting.
I'm not, but I'm pretty high up.
I just hit 126, so. When can you train the next level? Is it 125 or 150?
I forget.
I'm gonna go check real quick.
175 sounds right, but yeah, you might want to check.
125, because I just hit.
And then you gotta do a quest to go at some point. You gotta do a little quest.
Well, I got way further than I thought I was gonna get tonight with the fishing. Run around the corner. So gear score, entry quests, raid mobs. I feel like most of these things have been eliminated in current games by instancing the content, so on and so forth. Fishing. I went by it. Is there anything else that people can think of that is an example of barriers of entry that could be used in a toxic way?
No, I think that actually maybe we could discuss lockouts. I think some people view that as being a little toxic, and that's on the developers. I understand the reasoning behind it, but saying like, okay, because I'm doing this raid with my static, I can't run that with anybody else, right? Which I've always felt like I don't understand why you can't go help someone else and you're just not allowed to get rewards from it. Like, does any game do that? Where you can still run, even with the lockout on raid content, you can still run it with another group. However, you just can't get the rewards because that's not your static.
I don't think so. I think all games have that limitation in place because they don't want players being able to have a farm, being able to farm that raid gear without any sort of downtime. Hosh says it carry over from the old mindset of the Holy Trinity and demanding specific group setups. That maybe applies to certain games, but at the same time, I've always been of the opinion that creative people can find creative solutions. And because I will say that was absolutely a thing in EverQuest, as an example. It was very much a thing where if you weren't, you had to have a tank, a cleric, and an enchanter. And there were some people who would just specifically say that the ideal makeup is the tank is it's going to be a warrior, it's going to be a cleric, a shaman, an enchanter, a mage, and a wizard, or a mage and a rogue or something. They would have their preferred makeup, and they just wouldn't accept other players in their group unless they were one of those classes. And that would lead to people only playing certain classes if they were pugging, because if you didn't have a specific class, then you couldn't get groups if you were pugging. Now, I've always had static groups, so I've been very blessed in the sense that I've always been a social, outgoing player, so it's been easy for me to find groups my whole MMORPG career. I've never lacked for groups. I've never had to sit around looking for a group. But some of that might have carried over, but I don't think that applies to modern games, because most modern games have gotten rid of that in the sense that everybody kind of gets homogenized to a little degree, where you've all got a heal ability and you don't really need to do crowd control, and you can AoE everything down. I was pleasantly surprised when I found out that heroics in World of Warcraft Classic were hard enough that really you should probably use crowd control unless you're geared out like Dez is with his paladin in raid gear. Like, I'm pretty decently geared now with Stigwell. I've got 475 defense, which is not too far off from the cap. I've got a boatload of hit points, and I still died like 5 times today in Blood Furnace, which is like an entry level heroic. And some of
Yeah.
that was because we weren't doing crowd control.
Yeah.
And if I was playing from an elitist standpoint, then I would make sure that I had a mage with me, or some class that could lock down mobs properly. And we did have Montgar was with us, and was trapping mobs. So we did have some form of CC, but I don't really think that applies to modern games. But I do see it being applied to the older games, with the Holy Trinity still comes into mind. And if that's something that might be a better conversation to have around Pantheon, because Pantheon is proposing a return to that sort of aspect. But I think they're also, and correct me if I'm wrong, they are also providing multiple classes with crowd control abilities, not just one.
Yeah, they're
like
making it to
EverQuest.
where, yeah, it would be easier to have an enchanter, right? For example, an enchanter would be ideal for crowd control for almost any situation. It'd be nice to have an enchanter, right? But if you don't have an enchanter available, a rogue can do. Now, they're going to sacrifice DPS in order to do this big time, right? But they can concentrate if they're skilled enough and smart enough and use traps and smoke tricks and all kinds of other things to simulate. And we did this. We tested this, so it already works. And this is in a way older iteration and client than the game's at now. When we did Castle Deviere Dungeon live, well, we didn't get to do it live, but we got to record it, and they showed it off our adventure. But when we did that, because minus we didn't have an enchanter, and that was kind of the point, was let's see if we can survive something where this was designed where you would want an enchanter, but we don't have one, and screw it, let's not change everything up just so we get the perfect, makeup. Let's see, because Pantheon says we can play how we want. Let's see if we can make this work. And we absolutely did. It was more difficult. It was also, in my opinion, more fun. But we pulled it off. He was able to crowd control. Took longer to kill mobs because we were kind of missing his DPS. But it worked. And that's where you make the Holy Trinity really fun, in my opinion. Yes, it would be perfect to have your tank, your healer, your crowd control, and DPS. But if you're missing something in there, hey man, make do with what you got, and it may be harder, but you can still pull it off. I think that's the beauty of the Holy Trinity.
That's a good point.
And I've never been that guy, by the way. In raids, sometimes you have to. Okay, I'm not talking about raids. But just generally during the journey, leveling up, etc., I just take whoever's available. Whoever's looking for group, come on, let's go. Let's invite it up. Whatever we land with, let's figure it out and see how we can make this work with what we got, that's my favorite way to play MMOs, even the old school ones.
I think
play
that
with what you got. Yep.
If you can, I mean, there are going to be situations where, especially in a game like EverQuest 2 or World of Warcraft Classic, as an example, where because you have a limitation on how many people that you can take into a zone, there are sometimes restrictions because there are certain encounters that have DPS checks or mana checks or whatever the case may be, and you have to have a specific makeup to beat that fight. But I find that those are exceptions to the rule. Those are not like the majority, so it's you can generally take whoever you've got. As long as you've got, it's not like you could take 20 tanks, right? You probably need like 2 or 3 tanks, So there's a caveat to that.
But I wouldn't turn one down. You know what I mean?
Sure.
If it's a raid, that's different. But like
if it's
regular
a raid,
dungeon. Hey, I've ran dungeons where it was all pallies and it took
forever
to kill those mobs,
we're talking 2 different things though. Dungeon for sure, but raid, yeah, you're gonna have to probably say no.
You have to, because you're talking about really hard content here, so that requires a good group makeup, and that's a little different. You got to plan and organize that, or you're just not gonna be able to clear it. It's and everybody's gonna be, depending on how you look at it, wasting their time. And I think that's what drives some of Toxicity isn't necessarily people trying to be rude. They're trying to be respectful of everyone's time who is going.
Correct.
And it leads to somebody's feelings getting hurt and them feeling like it was toxic for them. But to the rest of the group, generally they're pretty happy about that move, because they only have a limited amount of time, just like everybody in the world. and that's their raid time, and they want to make some progress. They want to walk away, maybe not beating the raid, but at least feeling like they made some progress. And if they're getting to phase 3 and somebody can't make it, so they replace it with someone else who doesn't, they're not properly prepared, and now they're stuck on phase 1 all night. I mean, that was just a waste of their night. The
Wasted
phase 1 is no
everybody's time,
problem.
you know.
Yeah, wasted everybody's time. So I really believe in the reverse toxic. The person who realized at some point, I can't do this, I'm holding the group back, it's your responsibility at that point. Just say, hey guys, I'm sorry, I tried, I'm doing my best. You know, if you can tell me what I need to work on, I'll go do that, and maybe I can join you guys another time when I'm more prepared. That's your responsibility. When you keep forcing them to have to try to carry you, and they obviously can't, man, that's on you. That's on you. That's you're wasting all those people's time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And nobody ever wants to look at it from that point of view, but it's very true.
I agree. Um, this is probably a good point to wrap up, Nathan, because we're about
right.
10 minutes out from the guild meeting.
Great
so we need to-
conversation. Great
yeah, I
first
mean, it was
episode.
good. It was a good first episode. I feel like today was a very neutral episode because we didn't get into a topic where we were on either sides of the fence on. But rest assured, ladies and gentlemen, there will be some discussions where things might get a little fired up as we get into deeper into this. But I would also suggest to everyone, if you liked what you heard here tonight, don't forget to suggest topics if you would like to see us cover things. The show is going to be heavily centered on MMORPGs, but also tabletop RPGs and gaming in general. So we have a pretty good list of things to get going to start with. And remember, every Thursday night, 6 p.m. Central, we're going to be live on Twitch. These episodes will later get ported over to the Weave in the Void's YouTube channel. And if you want to support, so that everyone is aware, the Twitch channel here for the Weave in the Void is a partnership between myself, Nathan Napalm, Bounty Code, Sparrow, my brother, my wife Chris, and Skinny. So if you support here, you're supporting all of us with your subscriptions and follows and everything else, and we really appreciate that support because everything we do here is focused on building up the live streams on Sunday nights, which are the big things where we are live streaming the campaign for the Weave in the Void, which is our tabletop setting that my wife and my brother and I created. Nathan did artwork for, Bounty and Sparrow's daughter has done artwork for, and that's a big focus for all of us. We just started season 1. We've been doing the prequel campaign for the last few months. So make sure to tune in for those sessions as well on Sunday nights. More information about all of that stuff can be over at our Patreon page, patreon.com/weaveandvoid. There's multiple tiers. You can also go to weaveandvoid.com for more information on the source book itself and the entire project. And then these sessions are going to be hosted ahead of, drumroll please, our multi-stream sessions in World of Warcraft Classic. So from here, I'm going to be streaming on my channel, youtube.com/Renfield. Nathan's going to be streaming on his channel, youtube.com/Nathan Napalm. Sparrow's going to be streaming on her Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Sparrow. And we will be joined by Idrador, my brother, and Maduros, who are part of our static group. And we always play on Thursday nights, apart from once a month when there is a Pantheon event. But Maduros and my brother and I still stream on those nights, even though the other 2 party members are not here. But that's when you can check us out. Our guild is the Raven Syndicate. We are on the Peggle server Alliance side. We're about to go live with our first official guild meeting. Next week is Wrath of the Lich King. If you want to join us, we're on Peggle. We're on the Alliance. Anything you want to add to that, Nathan?
No, join us and hit that follow button so you can know when we do come back for our next show, which we're gonna do this every Thursday. So make sure you hit follow and yeah, let's do this guild meeting.
All right, thanks everybody. Great topics. Let us know if you have other things you would like us to consider as discussion points. We'll see everybody in game and on our live streams here in the next few minutes as we get going live.